Years of the Queen's reign. And with the state colour of the Queen's Company Friendly of Guards, with her company keeping guard of Her Majesty, the parade is forming up with the escort behind of the Blues and Royals to take Her Majesty to Windsor Castle. Just in front of her hearse, pages who looked after her over the years, and the procession formed up much as it was in London, with the court leading the Queen to her funeral.
Funeral! Procession! Finest center! Slow! March!
Led by the senior regiment of the British Army, the Life Guards. The band of the Household Cavalry is playing Mendelssohn's Funeral March. the state colour of the Queen's Company, has a wreath around it to mark that this is the battle honour day of Nijmegen. And also the black ribbons in mourning to reflect the sadness of this regiment. With the music of the bands leading this procession, it's quite possibly the music of the horses' hooves that would have given Elizabeth II the greatest pleasure. The band of the Grenadier Guards playing Regrets Panning, which will give way when they enter the long walk. To the massed pipes and drums, we'll play Loch Duch and Loch Etive Side. Of the United Kingdom from the College of Arms in London and the Court of Lord Lyon in Edinburgh, who always lead state processions in Parliament and up in the Scottish Parliament. The Master of the Horse in the centre of our picture, Paul Wybrew, who was page to the Queen, and other members of the Queen's household as they prepare to turn on the long journey up the long walk. And also Barry Mitford, the second page to the Queen. The two pages always kept the doors to the Queen and attended on her personally, and anyone seeking access to spend time with her would go through the pages for permission. A very personal service and a much loved Queen. Windsor Castle, waiting for the Queen to come home. Arthur King of Arms in his tabard at the rear of the Heralds will later read out all the Queen's titles. as she descends into the royal vault. And he will announce and proclaim the new king, as is tradition at the committal of a sovereign. As the late Queen passes through, the liners from her army, she passes the Royal Regiment of Scotland. Her association with Scottish regiments goes back to 1947, when she became Colonel-in-Chief of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. The long walk that stretches right out to the Copper Horse, which shows King George III at our end, is nearly 3 miles long. And it has been the processional route for Windsor, for royal weddings and for other state occasions. But also each year the Queen would pass down the long walk on her way to racing at Royal Ascot in the summer. It always came during the week that started with the service of Thanksgiving for the Most Noble Order of the Garter. Earlier this year, the Queen became the longest serving member of the Order of the Garter in history. And it is to the heart and religious home of the Order of the Garter, St George's Chapel, that this former sovereign of the order is being taken. And that is where she will be laid to rest, surrounded by her ancestors, who wore the garter with its motto, Honi soit qui mal y pense, shame to those who think evil of it. The band of the Household Cavalry playing Beethoven's Funeral March number 1 as the Queen passes through the third of her armed services, the Royal Air Force, giving their salute on this last part of the public journey before the Queen leaves the gaze of her public and goes through Cambridge Gate for the last approach to the entrance of Windsor Castle. The Royal Standard of His Majesty the King, or the State Standard, flies from the top of the Round Tower. The King is here with his family waiting for the late Queen to arrive. The cortege is about to pass through Cambridge Gate, and it was here earlier in this 10 days of mourning that the Prince and Princess of Wales came with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to meet members of the public who had come to lay floral tributes and just be close by in honour of the Queen, who now passes through those gates, through the extraordinary number of flowers that have been laid all the way up Cambridge Drive, but away from the public gaze, her 7 decades of service to them all now done. The great Sevastopol bell now chimes within the Round Tower, captured in the Crimean War, an echo back to the 19th century of difficulties in that part of the world today. The great bell from Sevastopol was brought to Windsor, and it chimes on the death of a sovereign. As it chimes, it's replied to by the other great bell of the Belfry Tower by St George's Chapel, as the gun too fires in salute. Terry Pendry there, the Queen's stud groom who regularly went riding with Her Majesty, holds Emma, the Queen's favourite horse, as members of the Royal Mews look on as the great equestrian Queen passes by. At the apex of all the paths that lead to the George IV gate, we see the Queen's own private apartments view out on this part of the reminding us that we would meet again. conclusion of the funeral service, the crown, sceptre and orb will be removed from the coffin, and the King will be invited to place the camp colour of the company commander of the Queen's Company, who the Queen was, on the coffin where it will always remain. And then the Lord Chamberlain will step forward and break his stave of office and place the two parts on the coffin before it descends. And at that point, all those in service to the late Queen are released from their duties. The sovereign is home, the minute gun fires, the Sevastopol bell rings. of the people she served stretching away on the long walk. And the horses separate from the Queen who loved horses so well as she now passes through the quadrangle underneath the round tower as her two corgis look on. They gave her so much pleasure in the last months of her life and became such characters from puppies as they filled the corridors with noise again and kept the Queen company. The King and his family wait to join this procession down from the upper ward through the middle ward and into the lower ward where St George's Chapel waits. Beyond the walls, in the east terrace, the cloud from the guns that fire can just be seen as the King and his family now take their position for the last part of this advance to St George's Chapel. Again, members of the household who served the Queen directly have lined up in Engine Court to make their final bow as the Queen passes by. Through the Norman Gate and the mass pipes and drums start to play Flowers of the Forest. Flowers of the Forest is a lament that remembers the Battle of Flodden Field in 1513, when most of the Scots who fought at the battle were killed. And it has always marked the final part of a sovereign's return to Windsor, and does so for Elizabeth, Queen of Scots. In 1948, as Princess Elizabeth, she came down this hill with her husband at her side, dressed in the robes of the Order of the Garter. It was the 600th anniversary of the foundation of the Order in 1348 by King Edward III. And her father installed her as a lady of the Order of the Garter and her husband as a knight. She served as sovereign of the Order from the day she became Queen. She comes home to St. George's Chapel, where she'll be laid to rest beside the father who gave her that Order of the Garter. And there she will rest for eternity. passing through the arch into the Horseshoe Cloister, where the scene is set to receive Her late Majesty as the Earl Marshal stands in the middle of the steps, and the ceremonial will begin to remove the Queen finally from the state hearse, as the bearer party will come forward and carry the company commander of the Queen's Company to her final rest. The journey that began at Balmoral all those days ago, that passed through the beauty of Aberdeenshire and down the east coast of Scotland to Edinburgh, where honour was given in that capital city of her northern kingdom. And thence by flight down to RAF Northolt, through rainy London to Buckingham Palace, ceremonially to the lying in state where so many people came to pay their respects. And now here to Windsor for the act of committal. The final salute to the sovereign. Queen Elizabeth II passes from the sight of the world into the chapel of her eternal rest. As the choir will sing a psalm, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help.
Timo.
The choir will begin the service by singing the Russian Kontakion for the Departed, which was sung also for the Duke of Edinburgh at his committal. the great St. George's Chapel, which has now taken into its crypt Elizabeth II. The royal family, who, like many here, have their own private memories, and you who have been with us will have yours. This last 10 days, as the King takes leave of the chapter and the Dean of Windsor outside, has been one of ceremony, one of reflection, one of gratitude for the service of a sovereign which has lasted more than 7 decades. The Archbishop thanking the King for his time in the last few weeks of preparing for his reign and travelling around the country, Queen Consort also taking leave. For the royal family now, the chance to be quiet, and this evening they will return here at 7:30 for a private interment when the Duke of Edinburgh and the late Queen will be placed in the vault in the St. George's Chapel's extension of King George VI's chapel. And as the King leaves, the reign is much in way, and our thoughts with him and with the royal family and all of you who've joined with us at this service of committal.
Many thanks to Alistair Bruce as we see the car carrying His Majesty the King away from the committal service of his mother, the Royal Standard, flying above Windsor Castle, signifying the monarch is in residence. We, at the conclusion of the grand ceremonial part of this sad day, as Alistair was saying, there is one final act to take place that will involve just the royal family when they return to St. George's Chapel later this evening for a private ceremony, and laying to rest in her final resting place of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in the King George VI Memorial Chapel alongside the Duke of Edinburgh, her mother and father, and her sister Princess Margaret. Well, watching and listening to proceedings with me here are Sir Anthony Selden, the Autumn historian, and our royal correspondent Laura Bundock. And Sir Anthony, as we watch these departure scenes, just share with us what we've seen in that chapel, first of all, this afternoon, the full stop to the end of Her Majesty's reign.
There was something, wasn't there, when the coffin was lowered into the ground, but the whole service, it was more personal than in the Westminster Abbey. It was more silent. It had a new dimension, and it was profoundly moving. It was people who know her well, who worked with her, who she loved, and
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex there.
They loved her. Look at the sombre face. You felt that on the King as well. You felt the full weight of the state on his shoulders.
And it was that sense of finality, wasn't it, Sir Anthony, when we saw that ceremonial, the removing of the symbols of monarchy from the coffin that had travelled atop it all day, the crown, the sceptre, and the all crown jewel, removing them, then the breaking of the staff, the wand of office by the Lord Chamberlain.
So powerful. Going back, reminding ourselves 1,000 years ago, William the Conqueror, established the first royal residence and castle here that is how long the royal family is. It was there at the bend of the River Thames to protect London, protect the nation, and that's what she did, and that's what she'll still do. Her memory from her grave. I think that the sense also that despite all the titles that went through, we didn't know a fearsome, angry, power-hungry monarch. There was just a delightful lady with no sense of her own ego and importance, and that was why we loved her. And I think that was such an example. I was thinking this morning of world leaders. They must be asking themselves, what was special about her, and do I need in my own countries to be the bully boy or occasionally bully woman that I have been. I think she is an example to everybody.
Laura, as we still see members of the royal family departing, it is like the end of any funeral in the sense that people build up to it, and then it's over and she is gone.
And we've had this ceremonial climax, I think, coming to this diminuendo towards the day, and some members of the family not taking cars, just wanting to make the walk back to the castle themselves. And it is a huge moment, of course, for the country, but for the family. And let's not forget, we saw there Princess Beatrice. This is her granny. She wrote that very moving statement with her sister, Princess Eugenie, talking about the happy times, the memories they have. They grew up not far from here. And you get a real sense, I think, the family grieving. And this was always the personal, the smaller service. The majority of the congregation here were household staff who worked in the royal households or on the royal estates, both past and present, some of whom would have worked for the Queen for decades and decades. And I think that was reflected in the service itself.
And just in terms of the family involvement, the family ceremony, the family focus this evening, Laura, we saw Her Majesty the Queen's coffin being lowered into the royal vault. That is where her husband currently lies. This evening they will be moved not too very far away to this special, the side chapel, the memorial chapel to her father.
Yeah, the King George VI Memorial Chapel. The Queen commissioned the chapel following the death of her father. It was finished in 1969. So quite newly built. She will have known that this would have been her final resting place as well. And so this evening, we won't see this. No cameras, no great congregation, just her family gathered around as she is laid to rest, alongside her mother, her father, and her sister too.
That's right, and apart from the fact that it's one of the great royal houses of Europe and of the world, as I say, there are familiarities for all of us of a funeral, of that sense of being bereft at the end of it.
Yes, absolutely. The figure I've been told is there have been 17,000 people who died in this country since she died. Many of them, of course, will be much younger than she was, and many dying prematurely. So this will trigger those memories, but also the memories that we all have. And for those of us who've loved people lost people we love dearly, we know that when the crowds disappear and we're left on our own, that can be the hardest time, when we're alone with our grief. And there's also the household. Some of those will not now have jobs. They've not just lost their leader, the Queen, but some of them will have lost their jobs as well. So this is a time of ending, but for many people in their different ways, sadnesses will continue.
And we were just seeing members of the royal family going back to other parts of Windsor Castle for their private moments before they reassemble, as we say, for that final service this evening. Other members of the congregation leaving just below us, and again, quietly talking amongst themselves, reflecting, remembering what they've just seen. This moment in history, overused, Sir Anthony, but never to be seen again like this in this country.
Well, we obviously hope that it will be a very long time before there's another royal burial here. I assume that Charles III will be buried here and become the 12th monarch to be buried at Windsor. But her reign, the world's second longest